Here are some of the most common problems I see on amateur sculpts. Although these are related to control over the surface on a technical level, they also contribute to the overall artistic quality of your model. I think these issues are often overlooked not because of a lack of technical ability in fixing them, but rather because of a lack of artistic ability to recognize the problems in the first place. You have to know what's wrong before you can effectively fix it. So hopefully what I'll be talking about here will encourage you to look at your own model with a more discerning eye. The first two here are closely related. Generally speaking, I think many artists are just too obsessed with working at really high subdivision levels. I think there's just something appealing for most people when they see this really smooth surface, and you think that you can get where you want to go faster if you just work at the final resolution. But that's not really the case. And although there are a lot of professional artists who work very well at high subdivision levels, I think if you feel like you're unable to control your surfaces as well as you'd like, then the first thing I'd recommend is to try working at lower subdivision levels first. As an example, I think it's possible to block out a very decent full human figure with less than 1 million polygons. I mean, with well under 1 million polygons, I think it's possible. I prefer to work at lower subdivision levels, not only because the performance of interacting with the mesh is more responsive, but also because it helps me focus on the more important, bigger shapes. This isn't to say that you have to tediously work through each subdivision level one at a time, but taking some care along the way will ensure that your larger forms and proportions are working before you start piling on the details. It's just a way to keep yourself focused on the more important things. And I think building up your subdivision levels helps prevent your model from getting a lumpy and uneven surface quality that I think is the result of trying to correct a problem on higher subdivision levels. And an example of that is, let's say I wanted to smooth this transition right here. I mean, there are a few ways you could go about doing this, but if you were to just try to smooth it at this current subdivision level, here you can see I'm holding down shift and I'm brushing, and it smooths it, but it's, I'm not, I have to do it a lot for one thing, and also it's just not, I want it to be more integrated than this. There's still this curvature. I'd want it to be more straight across in profile here. What I could do is I could brush it up, try to smooth out manually here, and then try to smooth this. But then you can see that all that brushing I did, it added these kind of lumps. And I see this a lot on models where there are all these bumpy surface quality that was not intended. So the way I would do it is I would step down, and let's work on this side. Because when you step down and you smooth it, you see the mesh is a whole lot more pliable at lower subdivision levels. And I mean, this is just the way, thankfully, ZBrush works this way, because if you had a lot of detail here, if you had and you were at higher subdivision levels and you had sculpted a lot of detail, and when you hold down shift and you smooth over it, you don't want all your detail to just disappear, and which is good, but for fixing transitions like this, it's very, very tedious. So even if you step back up again, you could go to a stronger smooth brush right here in your light box. Use this, and it is more effective than the normal smooth, but I think still the better approach would be to step down, smooth it, step back up, smooth it, step back up. Just make sure that it's working on all levels, and then you get a much nicer transition. That's just one example of where I think people run into getting these lumpy details. For comparison, here are two ways of looking at the same thing. This one I modeled with as cleanly as I could within the time I had. It's just a curved surface with some trim on top of it. And here's one where the underlying surface is a little bit, well, a lot more messy. You can see it's not shaped right. I mean, it still has the same detail. And this is kind of what I mean by making sure your form underneath is correct first. You want it to be curved. You want this to be right first before you put on that. And I think sometimes, you might jump the gun. You might have a surface that is kind of almost there, and then you can get kind of excited, go out and put these details on, and then you realize later on when you're looking at it, it's like, oh wait, this is kind of a bumpy surface. How am I going to fix this? I mean, you can try to bring things back a little bit using the form soft brush here. It kind of helps preserve details, but even in this case, it'll take you a long time, and you'll never have it as you never have it done as well as you would have if you had modeled it cleanly to begin with. And I think your model won't have proper dimensionality if your forms are bad. That's just kind of the bottom line. Hiding problems with excessive details might fool some people, but your model will never be as appealing as a simpler model with the correct forms. And even after you have established good forms, you can still destroy it with careless application of details. So you got to make sure that the larger forms read at all times. So let's say I had this, and let's start like that. And then let's say I wanted to add on some details. I'm going to be kind of messy here, but just some designs, and then I go kind of crazy and I add some more shapes to it. The danger you run, besides just looking terrible, is the more you detail you add, and the more deep it gets, and the more you get tunnel vision, and when you're just looking at it like this, trying to noodle in all this kind of detail, is when you zoom out again, you kind of lose the sensation of that curvature that was originally there. And that really is one of the biggest problems I see on models, is where the detail just distracts from what the surface should be. You want to make sure that this bigger form reads first. Well, not just first, but always. You should always be able to tell what the form is underneath all of this detail.